We're live. Welcome, everybody. We're going to be looking at, again, the January 2025 Regents. This is the one we worked at. I think everyone was in school today. If you weren't in school, we paused our review lessons. We strictly just worked on this, the multiple choice. If you've been a full participant in every review, well, at least last week, we looked at the part threes and then the part four. This one had a weird part four question, if you remember. We started the multiple choice today. I think the average was around halfway through the multiple choice. Some people finished. So what we'll do is kind of do it together. I don't want to just be like, hey guys, here's the answer, A, B, C, blah, 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 blah. So we'll take a little time explaining, at least maybe starting halfway through, because again, I think all the classes I at least got up through like halfway through the multiple choice. So we'll finish up the multiple choice. We'll look at the part twos. And then again, we'll spend a little time talking about the scoring aspect of this. So one thing I might recommend as we're doing these, especially like if you have your multiple choice, done or something like that, keeping track of things. This is all an honor system. I'm not collecting your grades. You're not getting a grade on this, but doing something like this, right? This way at the very end, we can kind of maybe tally things up if you want. If you're like, hey, I just want to focus on getting the content down and stuff like that. And with the written questions, something you could do is maybe if you already did them too, when we start going over what the answer was and things like that, you can, I don't know who this is, Cyphex. You can put a little note. We're going to do part twos today, so those are pretty easy. They're just 0, 1, or 2. You could put a little like, hey, 1, and then we'll tally everything up. Hey, what would I have gotten on this test? Okay, and then we could look at the conversion chart and things like that. Again, if you want. So let's get started. I'll quickly scan through these again. All three classes, we went over like I said, the first half of the multiple choice. We had a factoring completely question. Number 1 should have been choice 3. Number 2, we talked about the idea that you could use lin reg. That's choice 1. Again, I'm going to talk very quickly here because we did go over these. Number 3, choice 4, common ratio. What are you multiplying by? Number 4, the constant term, the thing without the variable, is the 5, choice 1. Number 5, the slope here. What does 55 represent? The hourly rate. The hourly rate. It's the slope. Number 6, distribute the negative. Choice 2. Choice 2. Number 7, look for the double overlap. Double overlap is at 4, 2. The solution region, the S area, if you will. Number 8, you can use the arithmetic explicit formula to figure that one out. You could also just, to be honest, be like -5, -5, -5, a few times and figure it out, worst case. Keep in mind in your green books, the little reference chart that you get on the Regents. I wouldn't recommend doing this with your green book, but on the actual Regents, you rip it out. So you don't forget that it's there. I've had people realize like, oh, at the end I saw it and I it was already too late. So rip it out. You'll have access to it. Your sequence formula is on there. Both sequence formulas. So your arithmetic explicit and your geometric explicit. So number 8, choice 1. Number 9, we have a literal equation, choice 2. Solving for W there, relatively easy literal equation comparative to your mock. Number 10, we have a two-way frequency table, choice 1. I think this question was on our stat test or a very similar one. And number 11, I'm not sure if all the classes got up to here. So we'll start, going in normal speed now. Number 11, we're solving let's just call it a linear equation, right? We're solving for X. Being that it's multiple choice, we do have in our back pocket, if we're panicking, if we're not able to solve it the traditional real way, that would always be my first recommendation. We do have the option of plugging in. However, I always like to say, look at the choices, not very convenient numbers to plug in. It's not like it's 0, 1, 1, 2, and 3 or something like that, right? I don't really want to plug these in. You could do things like store, some calculator tricks. To be honest, it's probably faster just to solve it. Okay, we distribute the -2. We bring the variables to one side. Be comfortable using fractions here. So I get -6 minus 9/2 is -21/2. I multiply by the reciprocal, or you could just divide by -21/2. You get an answer. My work's very sloppy here. You get an answer of 24/21. Okay, you can do that without a calculator. You have double negatives there, so 24/21, which does simplify to 8/7. If you typed it in your calculator actually simplifies it for you. Your calculator will just say 8/7. But if you're doing manually, just be aware it does simplify. So number 11, choice 1. Mr. Rankin talks about his kids half the beard. Okay. I was talking really fast. Gotta catch my breath here. Okay. Number 11, choice 1. Again, keep in mind, little check X. This way we could tally it all up when we're done. Number 12, 720 or 22, we got up to this question. This is, or 722, we got a lot further because you guys had the double yesterday. This is an exponent rule question. Okay, it looks very scary. It's like, what is going on here? This is just applying exponent rules. This is, we call this a few different names. I guess literally just the multiplication rule, the product rule. When you have like bases, you could add your exponents up. We all know this. Sometimes you just forget what it looks like as a definition. Like we all know that x squared times x to the 5th is x to the 7th. Hopefully we know that. So when you have it with variables, that's the same idea. A plus A is 2A, and the plus B just stays plus B. You wouldn't be able to do any rules for 1 and 2. And the problem with choice 4 is that would be 2A plus 2B. So close, but no. For 9 in class, Brian said it was choice 2, but you said it was choice 1. Huh? Number 9 is choice 2, yeah. I think maybe you're thinking of number 8. I don't remember that, Jeremy. Okay, number 13, we have a table of values. This is a pretty easy one. It was actually direct, not like I made the packet. Can't talk. The packet questions have been the same for quite a number of years, and this was on this January's Regents. It's a very similar question that we saw with that, like, hey, is it quadratic? Is it linear? Is it exponential? Very, very similar question, coincidentally. So this is exponential. It has a pattern of multiplying by 2. Choice 3 for number 13. It's an exponential table. Linear doesn't have a constant rate of change. 2 and 4, you'd see some symmetry. It'd also be kind of hard to differentiate between the two. Number 14, when you're solving a question where it asks, we've seen this type of question before. I'm not going to say you've seen this exact one. Sometimes you see a question, you get deja vu, and you're like, did we do this before? It's just that it's a similar question that you've seen probably 3 or 4 times. I always like to say to myself, figure out what the person did. So what did Stephanie do here? Because it's not clear. It's not like they show you her work. So I kind of penciled it in. She added 8 to both sides. Hey, she's solving it. She probably could have subtracted 7x at the same time, but whatever. So she added 8 to both sides. So what property is that? When you do something to both sides, it's called the blank property of equality. So the addition property of equality for number 14. Okay. Associative and commutative, to be honest, I haven't really seen, like, they put them as choices, but I haven't seen that like be a correct choice. I feel like all the examples I've seen recently, it's been property of equalities. I did see one where it was like a factoring question, and that's technically the distributive property. So that's a good little tidbit. Let's say someone's, whatever the equation, blah, 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 and they do this, and it's like, hey, what property justifies that? So they factored, but the property that justifies that, you would call it the distributive property. That happened once, pretty recently from what I remember. That one, you wouldn't think about that, right? Because you're not like distributing, you're doing the opposite, but it's the distributive property that outlines factoring. It's the inverse, right? It's the opposite. Number 15, properties with, or operations, I should say, with radicals. Okay, this is a new standard as of last year. So when I saw this question pop up on the January, I was like, wow, they're actually asking something that's brand new. They didn't ask any radical questions last year, but there's 2 on this Regents. So it says, what is the sum of 8 rad 3 and 1 rad 3, just rad 3, right? With radicals, the rule is what's underneath has to match. The radicand, we call that. So we do have a match here. And once you identify a match, you're just adding the coefficients. Kind of like if this said 8x and 1x. Okay. Hey, they're like terms. I could add these together. I say 9x. I don't make it like 9x squared. I don't do something weird. So the radical part stays the same. Choice 2 would be a very common incorrect choice here for number 15 because people just go, okay, add what's outside, add what's inside. But that's not how it works. So choice 4, choice 3, I guess if you subtracted, I don't know why you would do that. But yeah, choice 4. We have seen some questions, if you remember, this is like an easy version of what they were trying to test. The hard version of this question is like this. Oh, I'm putting 8. Like 2 rad 50 plus 5 rad 2. So these don't match, right? So I can't do anything as is right now, but what could I do here? Anyone remember these? When they don't match, what can you do? Yeah, obviously I had to make this on purpose. Usually it's, oh, you could simplify 50. I pull out a 25, that becomes 10, 5 times 2. And now all of a sudden they do match. And what's 10 rad 2 plus 5 rad 2? 15 rad 2. Being that this is a new standard and it's kind of like popular, I would expect to see something like question 15 come this June. And there's another one later on down the line in the part 2s as well. New topic. They want to throw that in there probably. All right. Number 16 was on your stat test. We'll talk about it quickly. Little like strategy here, because I remember on the stat test, a lot of people took a decent amount of time with this question because like, oh, I'm going to do one of our stats for this dot plot, one of our stats for this dot plot. Cross things off. Like 2 and 4 are not even in the game here, right? Mode is very obvious. Mode of 80. Roman numeral 2 doesn't have a mode of 80. Roman numeral 4 doesn't have a mode of 80. So it's between 1 and 3, and then you just have to do one of them. Because if I do 1 and it works, then I know that's the answer. If I do 1 and it doesn't work, then I know 3 is the answer. And 1 does end up working here. Median is 85. Okay, and your calculator median will say MED. Just make sure you type it in correctly. Keep in mind these are going by 5, so that's a 65. That might have been why some people had issues with this question. I think some people are reading the mean. So a median, MED. Okay, number 17. A few people called me over today. And we're like, what's going on with this? What is this? Like X bar? Does that mean like X divided by X? It's called set builder notation. Let me just erase all this. You don't need to know all this, but just to give you a brief little background, it's just like saying what the variable is. It's like, hey, X is the variable and X has to be blah, blah, blah. So what I gave as a tip, I was like, yeah, just like ignore this part. It's another alternative to like, what's the answer here? Choice 1. So you know how I think this would be how we would all write it. This was interval. We have inequality, right? This is inequality notation. Set builder notation is just another form of that. You say what your variable is. You have a little like vertical bar. And then it's just the inequality on the right. So I said, like, just ignore that X up front. Okay, and going back to the actual question, it is talking about domain. So you're looking left to right. What's the furthest it goes to the left? What's the furthest it goes to the right? It's not a closed circle, so it's not choice 2. Number 17, choice 1. Choice 1. For number 18, 18 should have been choice 2. This is kind of like a tedious question, not super difficult. You could probably like work with it long enough. You don't want to spend like 20 minutes on it though. What would I suggest for doing this? Your best bet, I said get it in y equals. So distribute, move the 1 over, and then utilize your calculator. So maybe type it into y equals. Notice you do have some decimals here, so you could make your table go by maybe quarters, since you do have a 0.25. You could turn on the ask feature on your graphing calculator. And then just manually type in these 4 inputs. So you have a few options. You could also just plug them in on the home screen, like 2 times 0.75 plus 1.5. And you're seeing which coordinate satisfies the equation when plugged in. I would probably use y equals to my benefit here, especially if you're very comfortable using things like ask or delta table, changing what your table goes by. That's hitting the plus sign when you're in your table. Ask is second, what is it, second window? Someone help me out. I don't have a calculator in front of me. Second, whatever the button next to y equals is. I think it's window. And you can turn on your independent variable to ask instead of auto. Yep, ask probably the best bet here. Also, just like cleaning it up, right? It's kind of messy right now. So move distribute, move the 1 over. 18, choice 2. All right, 19. I know we did 722. We got up to this day. It seemed like people are getting the hang of these finally. We're seeing these virtually on every single one. What's always my tip for how to do these? You can kind of still see my work here. Number 19, cancel. Yeah, the question is going to tell you the units you want. If you're like, what am I looking for? So the question highlights it here. You want it at the end to be inches per minute. So you're going to cross off until you get that result. Like in choice 1, only meters cross off. I would get seconds squared over minute inches. No. In choice 2, seconds. All right, that's not it either. And in choice 3, like nothing cancels again. Okay, I'd get meters squared times again minutes inches. I don't know what that is. Choice 4, everything cancels except for inches per minute. So meters and meters, seconds and seconds, and you're left with, we don't care about the numbers at all here. If you're getting confused by that, like, wait, what's the answer? Do we have to do that? No. This is the little trick for this. You're just checking your units. There's only going to be one that works out to the units that you want. Okay, number 19. Virtually a multiple choice. I would pretty much guarantee it. I would be surprised if it wasn't a multiple choice. I'll put it that way. If I look through the test when you guys are taking it on June 18th, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It's been on like the last 7 of them. I would be surprised. Also, can't really be a part 2 if you're scared about that. So it has to be, the way it's phrased has to be kind of like a part 1 question, a multiple choice. All right, number 20. We had this question on the stat test. One thing that I think threw some people off when we had one on the review sheet or one of the review days, you don't type the years in. Some of you guys entered this in as like a like an L1, L2 thing, and then you're like, wait, how do I do one var stats? All you care about is the temperature. You don't care about the year here. The year isn't really a variable. It's just like a noun almost, right? Your variable, your data is the temperature. Years aren't data. The years don't matter at all. Okay, and interquartile range isn't found under one of our stats. Interquartile range, which they do ironically give you on your formula sheet now. It's not a very complicated formula. Q3 minus Q1. So whatever that is, it works out to 11. Okay, number 20, choice 3. Number 21, if you were to take a quadratic and multiply it by something, but they give you a little thing, it's going to be less than -1. So what I would say here is like choose a number just to have a frame of reference. So like -2, let's call it. So how does x squared compare to -2x squared, right? First of all, what would the negative sign do to your quadratic? And then think about what the 2 would do as well. So there's 2 things at play here. It ends up being choice 4. So it would be upside down. It would be reflected over x. So you see right away I crossed off 1 and 3. So it's between 2 and 4. Hey, is it getting wider or is it getting more narrow? Since it's a 2, the absolute value is 2, it is going to get more narrow. Choice 2 would be like if it was like 0.5, negative 0.5. 21, choice 4. Okay. For 22, I haven't seen something like this, a number line inequality. That's something we usually do in like, we do it a little bit in 7th grade math. Maybe you did a little bit in 6th grade math last year. You guys could tell me. I don't think you guys did 2-step inequalities, but maybe you did number lines at least. So this was new. Seeing the number lines was a weird inclusion on this test. I was a little like, oh, that's weird. I haven't seen that before. Not that it makes any difference or it makes it any harder. We also talked, the answer is 4 for 22. We also talked about the idea that you can, it's kind of a bad arrangement of choices, because you could figure out the answer just by the symbol itself. And you might be saying, wait, isn't it greater than or equal to? Shouldn't the answer be 2? But if you look at it, there's a negative here. So when you were to solve this, you are dividing by a negative at some point at the very end, which means your sign would flip. So the sign at the end is going to be this. The only one that's less than or equal to is choice 4. So you could be a little clever. Or you could just actually solve it. You would subtract 6.4 from both sides. Again, you would divide by -4. And dividing by negative, you flip your sign. You get x is less than or equal to 2.3. Choice 4 for number 22. Number 23, I think a few people had problems with. I don't know why. The phrasing's a little awkward. Let's see. The number of fish in a pond is 8 more than the number of frogs. It's at least 20. What does at least translate to? Greater than or equal to? If x is the number of frogs, what model this basically? Okay, so x is the number of frogs, and it says the number of fish is 8 more than the number of frogs. So if there's x frogs and there's 8 more fish, how would you represent the number of fish? Just x plus 8. And putting those two together, because then it says both of them together is at least 20. X plus 8, which is simply 2x plus 8. Number 23, choice 2. Phrasing's a little awkward, but shouldn't have been that difficult of a question. And last one, a little bit of a challenge. I've seen a similar question to this. I think we had something like this on one of our function tests. Increasing, it might have been like slightly different, but I've definitely seen something very similar to this. Number 24 should be choice 4. It's looking in this window, so that's what I'm doing with the little bars here. If you're like, what the heck is this? Between -3 and +3, it's strictly decreasing. Every other one has some sort of problem. This one, choice 1 is always increasing. Choice 3 is also always increasing. Choice 2 has a certain stretch where it's decreasing, but then it has a stretch where it's increasing. So is it always decreasing? No. It's like 50-50 choice 2. The only one that's decreasing that entire interval is choice 4. What does decreasing mean? Simply going down from left to right. Okay, a negative average rate of change, a negative slope. Why are there a lot? Yeah, there were a lot of 4s. What I want you guys to do, first of all, if you missed anything, if you want to type in the chat, if you're like, wait, what was number 7? I want to close the book on the multiple choice, but take a minute to flip through and say to yourself, hey, out of these 24, how many did I get correct? Maybe you left one blank because you didn't know how to do it. Maybe, you didn't have time, you didn't get to it, whatever it may be. But like, hey, I didn't get to it, but I knew how to do that one, so I'm going to count that. That's fine. But how many of these did you get incorrect? Or let me phrase it the positive way. How many did you get correct out of 24? Hopefully 24. You don't need to write in the chat or anything, but yeah, just have like a little mental note, because at the very end, what I want to do is, again, have a score in mind. So right now, let's say hypothetically, you're saying to yourself, hey, I got like 1 wrong, right? You got 23 out of 24. Point wise, does anyone remember how many points the multiple choice are worth? 2 points each. So again, if you got a 23, you have 46 points currently, right? We want to talk about the idea or have a goal in mind of getting as close to that 82 as possible, hopefully hitting 82. There's a few questions in the chat. What was number 11? Number 11 was choice 1. Oh, Sakat, thank you. You answered that. What did you have to do for 21 again? What was 21? 21 is, I said, like, choose a sample number that fits. So like -2, the negative makes it upside down, the 2 makes it more narrow. Worst case, you could always just type the function into your calculator too to actually visually see it. Like, oh, it did go upside down if you forgot. And oh, it is more narrow. Okay, do we all have like a little bit of a mental note on how we did? What are our feelings on this multiple choice? Pretty fair, difficult, some weird ones? In my opinion, I would say pretty fair. Nothing like crazy, no weird, very hard one. Very fair multiple choice, I would say. Sometimes I think like the mock Regents you guys took, there was one or two that were a little like, this was a pretty fair multiple choice. Four? What does four mean? 4 out of 10? Question four? Question four was hard? Oh, so many fours. How many fours were there? I mean, statistically, there should be six. One, one, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 8. Two more than what it should be. My teacher always said never. She told this story about how there was a one. I don't think they would do this anymore on purpose because they consider stuff like this. But there was a Regents where there was a stretch of like, I don't remember what the exact number was, but six that were like the same choice in a row. It was like C, 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 over and over again. And what do you think kids did? Like, if that happened to you on a test, what would all you guys do? You'd all be panicking, raise your hand. People started changing their answers because they're like, oh, it must be wrong. I wouldn't get six of the same in a row, whatever. And it was like a catastrophe. So she always said, like, hey, if you're confident that that's the answer, don't analyze it from the perspective of like, oh, this is suspicious. I'm getting too many in a row. Let me change something. If you're more confident in the math, don't start like changing things. I always joked that I was going to give a test where every answer was like the same number, just to see how people would panic and almost like teach a lesson on that. Like, hey, be confident in how you're doing it. Don't analyze it from like a test perspective. To be honest, like when I'm making a test, I don't really consider that. Maybe at the very end, I'll catch it and be like, oh, let me switch this up. But there's so many variables, no pun intended, on a math test that, you know, that's like the very last thing I'm thinking about. Like, oh, did I put too many C's? Did I put too many E's? All right, good with the multiple choice? All right, we'll start looking at the part twos. How are we doing on time? 7:30. Okay. Any questions on the multiple choice before we close the book on this? All right, let's take a look at the part twos. Again, I'm going to scan through. Okay, we did one part because this is the same file. Yeah. So we did one part two together if you attended last week. And then I think we did two part threes and we did the very last question. Okay. So we'll try as best as we can to get as many of these done as we can. If not, it's not the end of the world. Part twos are pretty quick, so we should be able to fly through those. There's 6 of these, keep in mind. There used to be 8. We have a graph here. I'm kind of doing this live too. I don't have my answer key. We have a graph of Sally. Ooh, speed graph. Okay, we did this topic if you remember. We did speed graphs and we did distance graphs. State an interval when Sally is traveling at a constant speed. Explain your reasoning. What would you guys say here? State an interval. And I want to have the model responses up. What would we say? 5 to 9. Yeah, you could write it the fancy way. I see Kristen wrote it, Justin, right? You could also just write like 5 minutes hyphen 9 minutes. When they phrase it like this, like they're not being super specific. They'll know what you mean if you put this, right? They're not going to misinterpret that like as a coordinate, but you could write it a variety of ways. I would like if you're asking me how I would write it, it's technically with parentheses. They wouldn't take off for brackets though. We never include that came up today with something. We never include the boundary point because if you're putting bracket 5, then you're telling me you're moving at a constant speed here, but wasn't that also a part of that line that was increasing? So it's kind of like that transition, that neutral point. If we're being technical, would would the regions take off for that? Probably not. And what's your reasoning? What would we say for reasoning here? Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Slope of 0. Okay. I like that. I would say something like she's going 35 miles per hour the entire time. Something like that. Her speed doesn't change. Any horizontal line on a speed graph is constant speed. There's a bunch of explanations. I have the model responses pulled up. I'll read some here. It says this is their perfect example. At 5 to 9 minutes, Sally is traveling at a constant speed because the rate of change is 0. That's what Kristen said. The slope is 0, and the speed is not increasing nor decreasing. Okay, and then there's one that also gets perfect score. She stays at 35 miles per hour. Like I said, you can keep it basic. Kind of for like intervals, yes. If you're giving me like the domain or range, then you should have brackets. Like for an interval explaining like increasing, decreasing, or identifying a stretch of something. There are cases where you use brackets, yeah. Otherwise, why would they exist? Like I said, you could write it like this. It doesn't say like interval notation. If it's an interval notation, then you'd have to write it the fancy way. Okay, not a bad one to start. Graph a quadratic. All right, this isn't bad. I think I put this one on one of your quadratic tests. I always say with these, make a table, guys. Make a table. Don't just jump into the graph. Make a table. Takes about 10 seconds. Okay, you would type this into your calculator. Someone help us out that has a calculator handy. In the middle of your table, you want that vertex. The most important point on a quadratic or in a table is that middle point, that symmetrical vertex. Here, if you do your formula, you can anticipate where it would be, negative b over 2a. You would get a vertex at -2. -2. And then you build around that. Thank you. Oh, people are typing the table out. What's next in -2, -1, -1, 0, 0, 3. Thank you, guys. Okay. And now I was wondering why the graph is so small. And it looks like these numbers are just pretty small. It's like a 5 by 5 graph. You get this little mini baby graph. Okay, my graph's a little ugly, but you get the idea. Split it in half, take your time, nice neat graph, arrows on both sides. Can anyone tell me what would be wrong with this? What's wrong on the bottom? I see this all the time. This one kills me. My equal sign, no work. Yeah, you need to say x equals. Axis of symmetry is a vertical line. You need the x equals. I've seen people get 99s because of that. I've seen people get 64. No, I'm just kidding. I've seen, it's a silly point to lose. 1 point because you forgot to say x equals. Okay, it's the x value of the vertex, but yeah, you do need to say x equals. Not a bad one there, quadratic. Okay, good with that. I don't think there's any surprises I need to look through on the thing here. Maybe there is. Yeah, their 1 out of 2 is exactly what I just said. That would be very common. Ooh, someone wrote y equals -2. I've never seen that. Huh? If you don't put arrows, you lose a point. So yeah, a bunch of things. Okay. 27. State an appropriate value for m in the table so that the function remains, so f of x remains a function. Any number? So give me a number for m. These are always annoying questions to grade from a teaching perspective because there's a million answers to this. Can someone give me a number? Give me a number. 7, Kelly says. Yeah, as long as it's not it's not 0, 3, 2, 6, 1, 5, or 4, you're good. Okay, we're looking for, we say like X can't repeat. Okay, so explain your reasoning. Why is this still a function if we chose 7? We could say all input, aka X values, are unique. That's another way of saying like X doesn't repeat, right? Each X value is associated with one Y value. Really quickly, I'll read through some of the models. This is their perfect 2 out of 2. The number, oh, this is weird. Number 7. The number I chose was 7. Hoping people don't have the model responses open in front of them. But any number that isn't already listed in the X section of the table is an appropriate value. This is because in functions, each point must have a different input. Yeah, that's a weird way of saying it. The input has to be unique, someone wrote. I like that. This person chose, why did everyone choose 7? Am I missing something? Every model response is 7. You guys said 7. What's going on? Pi, yeah. Why is everyone choosing 7? Because it goes, oh, yeah. Okay, I see that now. It doesn't have to be 7. That's weird. Yeah, it's out of order too, which is weird. You could say anything. I think some of you guys did that on the mock. You thought like it had to follow a pattern. It could be literally anything. It's not saying it's linear. 6, 7. Okay. Was that a trend when the January regions came out? All right, CTS. Kind of an annoying question for a 2-point question. A lot of work for CTS. CTS, it is set up nicely for. We have that odd B value. We have the constant on the right side. Let's see what we got. I always say magic number. You make your little box, right? You don't need to do this. I think it just helps people. What's the magic number with this question? And then we'll explain how we get it. Yeah, 16. It's going to be half of this number, it's b over 2, squared. Okay, so half of b is 4, squared is 16. And now we add that to both sides to keep it balanced. On the right, we get 49, which is going to be interesting in a few steps. And on the left, we can now factor this. We call it a perfect trinomial. Perfect trinomial because we could write it as a bubble times itself, or a bubble squared. What is that bubble we could write it as? X, excuse me, X plus 4. Yeah. You don't need to sit and do some product. Okay. I always say this is going to be half. This is going to be a 2-to-1 relationship. You're splitting it into 2 equal groups. Think of it that way. I have 8 X's. I'm splitting it into 4X and 4X. You could sit and do some product if you like, but yeah, you could just kind of cut to the chase there. And now we use square roots. Square roots will cancel out the squared. And square root of 49, don't write 7, plus or minus 7. And now, interesting, this is why I said this earlier, because usually we have like a radical. There's no radical here. This is going to work out nicely. This was factorable. So like people would probably factor this being like, hey, I don't want to do CTS. But if they tell you to do it a certain way, you need to do it that way. They're telling you CTS, you got to do CTS. Without even looking at the model responses, I'm going to guess that if you do factoring or something else weird, you're going to get a 1 out of 2. If they tell you to do something, you unfortunately have to do it that way. If they just said solve this, then yeah, you could do anything you want. Move the 4 over. I always like to put the plus minus in the middle and now split it up. -4 plus 7 is 3. -4 minus 7 is -11. So 3 and -11. Let me look at the models for this guy. Yep, 2 out of 2, showing CTS. Okay, someone did factoring I'm looking at. What the heck? Instead of some product, they call it AM method. I don't like that. Add multiply. That's weird. Okay, yeah. So if you do factoring, you get a 1 out of 2. Yeah, if you have some mistakes, you can get a 1 out of 2, like some sort of calculation mistake. Like maybe I had everything perfect, but I wrote like -3 and +11 at the end, 1 out of 2. Part twos are pretty easy to grade or figure out what you would get. The Regents isn't online, Sakath. It's on paper. But yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how they get model responses. They must give like sample tests to people somewhere, but then it couldn't be like algebra students because they would know what questions are coming. Maybe they give them to like older students. I have no idea. Wait, how did you split it up? Oh, I'm just saying do the addition and subtraction separately. Yep. What do we have to split it up? I just wrote it like that. Like how you write your answer, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't put this. I'm curious, what would they do if you put that? It's not in the model. I would assume they would take off because you're like not giving a simplified answer. All right. Yeah, kind of annoying because you're doing a lot of work here for 2 points. But yeah, that's it. 3 and -11. Okay. But if we did no, why would you? That's like saying the answer is x equals 2 plus 2. Like you would want to do the math there. So if you ever get to a point with quad formula or CTS, if you get to this stage, you wouldn't want to just stop and circle this. You would do the math separately. So you would do 2 plus 3 and 2 minus 3. That's what I mean when I say like split it up. Like actually do the math. If this is a radical, I can't do the math, right? But if it's a number, I could sit and do the addition and subtraction. So yeah, you do have to take it that next step. Don't just circle that. I don't know why I did. Go to 28. All right, 29. I think we went over last week because I still have my work here. This was a function notation question. Not asking us to plug into 22, but rather figure out what could you plug in to get an answer of -22. It says algebraically, so I can't just be like, oh, I looked at my calculator. So I'm showing my work here. I set the function equal to -22, and now I'm basically solving for x. So I multiply by 2 to get rid of the divide by 2. I add 5 to both sides, and I divide by -3 to get 13. And then you could check on your calculator if you'd like. Function notation question. Haven't really seen something like this, to be honest. So this is a little bit of a new one. Usually they ask you like to plug something in, but a little bit of a backwards approach. We did this last week. If you're here, if you're not here, here's the answer. X equals 13. All right, this is the one I was talking about earlier. And we've seen this. If you're like, oh, I feel like I've done this before. We may be a little rusty with it. Mitesh, house reveal. Rationalizing a denominator. I think your camera popped on for a sec. Rationalizing a denominator. So we have 4 over radical 2. So when we first learned this, I told you guys it's kind of like improper to have a radical in the denominator. No worries, Mitesh. It's kind of improper to have a radical in the denominator, so we want to get it out of there without changing the value of what this is. So how do we do that? Right? I don't want to change the value of it, but I want to clean it up. I want to get the radical out of there. Does anyone remember how to do this? Unfortunately, this is not the answer. Multiply, okay. You got to give me by what? By rad 2. Yeah, it's multiplying the top and bottom by whatever the radical is that's trapped. There's 2 reasons why this works. First, multiplying a radical by itself will help free it, right? Any radical times by another identical one will just give you whatever's underneath. Like rad 5 times rad 5 is 5. The other reason why this works, if you look at this holistically, right? What is rad 2 divided by rad 2? 1. So that's the reason why I'm allowed to do this. I'm not changing the value of it because technically I'm multiplying it by 1. Obviously, it's letting me like remold it, but technically I'm not changing the value. Okay, so let's do our math here. 4 times rad 2 is 4 rad 2. Rad 2 times rad 2 is rad 4, which just equals 2. Again, anytime you multiply a radical by itself, you simply get what's underneath. The radicand is what we call that, the 2. And now you get a 1 out of 2 if you put this. Very unfortunate. You get a 1 out of 2. What's wrong with this? You get a 1 out of 2. Yeah, it's even in the model. Not simplified. Yeah, 4 divided by 2. I think that got a lot of people. I know I saw some people today do that, right? You're so focused on like the hard part of it, you forget that 4 divided by 2 is 2. It does say simplest form, so they got you on the hook there. They could be like, hey, we did ask for it. Okay. That's one of those where like, hey, maybe checking over it, you catch that hopefully. Like, hey, I did the question now. We're always going to say, like, look at what it's asking you to do. Simplest form. So we rationalized it, but did you put it in simplest form? No. Okay. Good question there. Number 32, radical 2. That's the only thing I see in the model responses as well. That gets a 1. Oh, you get a 1 if you put 4? This gets a 1? Wow. So they have this in the model responses, which is funny. So if you do this, you get a 1. The student multiplied by rad 2 over 1 instead of rad 2 over rad 2. Ugh, I would not give that a 1. But it's unfair that this person gets a 1 and the person that did this gets a 1. Right? We always compare like, oh man, I had a better mistake than you did. But unfortunately, those both get a 1. All right. And we did, I think the only thing we're missing here, this one was on your test. We all know how to do regression and things like that. I'll just pull up the answer here. Right. This is using your calculator. You just want to make sure you're rounding to the correct decimal, typing things in. There's a few people on the stat test. Your mistake was like you just entered data in wrong. Or maybe this one was on the review sheet. I don't think this one was on your test. It says nearest 10th. Usually it's nearest 100th, so that's a little weird. Correlation nearest 10th. That's a little strange. And then how would you describe this? Correlation, remember, is the R value. Man, I don't like this model. Strong and positive. Their model response actually just says strong, which I don't like. So strong and positive. And then if it does say context of the situation, just talk about the nouns. So you would say strong and positive relationship between heart rate and calories. But it doesn't even say that. So strong and positive is fine. Again, make sure you're rounding appropriately. I always do a once over after I type in all my values. Like when I was taking tests, I would like put the calculator down and look back and forth just to make sure I didn't make a typo. That happens more often than you think. Okay. Again, I'm kind of treating this like, hey, we all know how to do this. I called this a layup the first time we talked about it. It's going to happen on your test. This is almost like a free 4 points. Some people, hopefully not, knock on wood. Maybe just some small error, forgetting y equals, rounding in, incorrectly, something like that. I don't think anyone's going to look at question 32 and be like, oh my God, I have no idea how to do this. Linear regression, they'll call it. I don't really know anything else you can call it. Line of best fit, but linear regression would be the most common. All right, and we'll end with this one because we did everything else. If you weren't here last week, maybe watch the video from session 5. If you ever miss one of these guys, the videos are posted. I'm not sure if people are watching them or not. I do record these. If you missed one and you're like, hey, I wanted to see the answers for that, please feel free to watch it. It's on Google Classroom. So we'll end with this guy. We have a quad formula question. Did we do 31? Yeah, we did 31 in the last meet, the coin one. Sorry, yeah, the answer was 9 and 16. 9, it was a coin system. 9 and 16 was the answer. I'll post this whole a neater version because my handwriting is kind of ugly on this. I'll post a neater version of my key. Whenever we finish a Regents, I update that on Google Classroom as well. If you've seen those, I'm keeping like a running log. Da, 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 da. All right, quad formula. It says simplest radical form, so that tells me like, hey, this is probably not going to work out nicely. Da, da, da. Tells you how to do it, so we got to do it. I like to do this. Quad formula is on our reference sheet, so we don't have to memorize it like when I took the test. And we plug in. One common mistake I'm still seeing with quad formula happens with the radicand, right? With negatives, particularly if that's like a negative b value. People are saying like negative 16 when they square it. So make sure that you're really iron tight with your calculations there. Use parentheses. I always suggest do your radical like separately. Like, what do I mean by that? Like type this into your calculator and then figure out, hey, what is that? And really double check it. Hey, am I using parentheses? Am I missing a sign somewhere? Am I making a very silly mistake? So that should be what, 28? I say that as I don't type mine into a calculator. You get this. Doesn't work out to 4 because it's 16 minus negative 12. So 16 plus 12 is 28. Okay, negative 4 plus or minus rad 28, that's negative 4. We want to simplify radical 28. We want to simplify radical 28. So we're going to pull out a 7 and 4, pull out a perfect square. 4 is going to become 2. 2 rad 7 over 2. Okay, and I'm curious about something. I want to have the models up for this because they didn't do this last year. Yeah, okay. So if you put this, you get full credit. Now, would I give this full credit? Probably not. I wouldn't count this as simplest form, just like the one we did with rationalizing. Well, most of us here would do what? Yeah, the heart. I wouldn't count this as simplest form. It's not fully simplified. I don't know why the Regents is. Am I stricter than New York State? Maybe. We draw a little heart. These have a 2 in common. We get negative 2 plus or minus. There's no more 2 there, so you could put a 1. You could just leave it. And you get negative 2 plus or minus rad 7. So you divide everybody by 2. You don't need to put divide by 1, just like you don't need to put 1 radical 7. But if you don't do that, you still get full credit. I guess they're just focused on the radical. Maybe that's their argument. Like, hey, we just care about the radical being simplified. But to me, simplest form implies everything has to be fully simplified. New op alert. Okay. That's a very broken up completion of the January Regents. Again, we did some of the other questions last week. If you wanted to check those out, or I'll upload this answer key. We did the multiple choice a little bit in class today. We quickly did a speed run again through that. And then we wrapped up everything in this video. Timing worked out pretty nicely here. Look at that, 7:58. Again, keep in mind, maybe we'll talk about this a little bit in class tomorrow. You already had a number for your multiple choice. So I'm going to use 23 out of 24. So you have a 46. With the part twos, hey, do you feel like either if you had them done already, or like, hey, I would have got all those. I knew how to do them as you were going over the answers. I was typing them in the chat. I was, hitting home runs with all those. Okay, that's 12 points. Okay, 6 questions, 2 points each. The part threes, okay, maybe one of them, like I forgot to do forgot to simplify something. I lost a point there. Start to like tally these up or have a number in mind for all of them. There's 4 4-point questions for the part threes. So let's say you got a 15 there. I would have lost a point, whatever it was. And then the part 4 is just a 6-point question. Okay, you tally it all up. And then you can look at the conversion chart. This is why this is helpful. Again, I'm not giving you a score on this. I'm not tracking this. This is like an honor system if you want to do well. Like, hey, okay, I got to, what does this actually add up to? 27, 33, 79. So if you got 79 raw points, again, I just use these random things as an example. On the conversion chart, you got a 96. Okay. Why is this useful to know? It gives you a little frame of reference. Like, okay, I did pretty good. I was like talking to my friend, doing it in class. I wasn't fully locked in. I got a 96. I had a few little silly errors. I'll clean those up, and hopefully maybe even do even better. So we'll really start. I know this one was very broken up. Once we're done with our review lessons, we'll have a few. I'm never going to have a period where I'm like, guys, dead silent. Let's just work on a Regents. I don't think that's like super beneficial, and you could do that in your free time. But I do want to talk more and more about this as we get closer to it, like the scoring idea and kind of scoring yourself, or at least being aware of all these things. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot, but any questions with that? Questions? Any questions with the January Regents? Did you miss anything? Did you want to see one from last week? Even though I'll just put it up on the screen. We're good? It was called something else when I took it. Algebra 1 is like a newer name. Algebra 1 came out in like 2014. When I took it, it was called the Math A Regents, probably the same as your parents if they went to school in New York State, because it was around from like the early 2000s to like 2010, something like that. I got a 96. I don't know what I got wrong. I got a 96 on all my math Regents. See if I could actually find it. Charlie's sleeping. Charlie has not made an appearance in a while. We'll get her back on one of these. Next week, we got to talk about as well, because where is this? Next week, Wednesday, I'm not available. Thursday, Friday, we're off of school. Well, you guys are off of school. So we'll figure out a date for next week. I'm either thinking Tuesday, which is field day now, so maybe that won't work either. We'll figure something out. If we have to do it Thursday, is that cool with you guys? I know it's a day off of school. We'll figure something out. We'll talk tomorrow in class, Friday in class as well, to figure out a date for next week, but I'm not available on Wednesday. Ooh, I found the Regents I took. I took the 2005. If you want to do my Regents, it's in the chat. Math A it's like algebra, but there's some weird topics. It was like, instead of it being algebra, geo, and math, like right now, you guys are in algebra. Next year, you go to geo, and then algebra 2. They were called Math A and Math B. So Math A was like algebra and like half of geo. Like if you go through this, you'll see like some geometry questions. And then Math B was like the other half of geo and algebra 2 stuff. So it was like a really weird way of breaking it up, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But yeah. Yeah. All right, let me stop the recording. If there's any, I'll stick around. Any questions?